Hi, all, and welcome to the panel discussion New in Graphic. My name is Louie Lauer. I'm Library Media Specialist for Fargo Public Schools and your moderator for this panel. In this session, we will be talking to 4 graphic novel creators about their upcoming titles and get a peek into their process of creation. We've got a great panel today. Let's welcome our panel in his first graphic novel, Family Force 5 or Family Force V from Skybound Comics. Animator and director Matt Braley introduces us to Maze Shraki and her family of superheroes. In addition to combating the alien monsters that show up now and again, 15-year-old Maze is also trying to navigate high school and being a teenager, all which she is having a hard time balancing. Please welcome Matt Braley. Welcome, Matt. 5th grader Stella is finding the workload and reading especially challenging this year in Cami Garcia's Mix Up from Macmillan Children's. Unable to even participate with her friends in an online world patterned after their favorite television show, Stella feels that she's stupid until her teachers help her discover that maybe there's something else going on that's causing such difficulty. Please welcome Cami Garcia. Welcome, Cami. And Abby is sure itching to get away from her younger siblings in Remy Lie's Chickenpox from Macmillan Children's. But when Chickenpox keeps everyone home itching instead, Abby will either go crazy or learn at least some of the joys of being a big sister. Please welcome Remy Lie. In their 3rd book featuring Mexicali, Baja California, Halfway to Somewhere from Random House Children's Books, Jose Pimienta explores questions of identity amidst change. When 12-year-old Ave moves with their mother and brother to Lawrence, Kansas, this leaving father and sister behind, Ave wonders if they'll be able to hold on to their Mexican roots now that they are American. Please welcome Jose Pimienta and welcome to all of you. One final note, talking about Verity Nelson is running for her 3rd term as class president, and Hope Larson's very bad at math. HarperCollins children's books. Verity looks like she has everything together until a failing grade threatens to derail her candidacy. Unfortunately, Hope is unable to join us today. Living in the Asheville area, she and her family are still without Wi-Fi due to Hurricane Helene. They're all safe and they're all healthy. We send all of our positive vibes their way. So, and in lieu of that, of her participation, I'll do a little bit of an introduction to her book, Very Bad at Math. Well, welcome you all. We're so glad to have you here. It's so great to be here, and I love getting to talk graphics. What a great way to spend the next 50 minutes. So this question is for all of you. And sometimes this format is criticized as being kind of reading light or not real reading. With the work we're going to discuss today, each of you proves these accusations to be false, covering wide-ranging topics like loss, racial identity, divorce, growing up, family dynamics, learning disabilities. You've shown how this format can be used well to tackle real issues. What is it about the graphic novel format that makes it so conducive to covering more serious or more difficult topics? I'd like to start with Jose on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for having me here, and it's lovely to see everyone. I'm gonna get really serious about this one really quick, because I'm a strong believer that comics are literature, flat out, undisputedly. And the reason why I think that this conversation happens so much is because, unlike prose, words are very abstract, so therefore it kind of calls for the reader to actually be imagining this. But with comics, it's very specific visually, that so much that it also relies on a different language entirely. It's a visual language on its own. And also what I mean by that is that like the visuals make it more concrete and more specific on what the author is intending to portray. And because of that, that kind of tackles into something that has been happening in our culture for a very long time, which is that the abstract words, the abstract thought of prose is meant to be taken more serious as opposed to the visual descriptors. And I'm very happy that we're finally having conversations where that in particular is being recalibrated and therefore being taken in a new direction to say, like, no, visuals are not just for kids. They actually do tackle something more specific. So yeah, I mean, I'm just very glad to be part of the part of that conversation.
Wonderful. Same question, Cami.
Hi. So I was a teacher for 17 years and a reading specialist. So I always find this, that point of view particularly offensive because graphic novels, research has actually shown that it is more difficult to read a graphic novel and a comic than a prose book. And in terms of young children, meaning elementary through 12th grade, in studies, they've found that children that read graphic novels, they have faster vocabulary acquisition. They have to use more critical thinking skills because of the gutters. They have to imagine what's happening between the panels and use a lot of critical thinking skills to put those pieces together. And they also end up in high school, if they read graphic novels from a young age, they find that they read more widely in genres, including in prose novels. So giving students graphic novels at a young age is actually really promoting literacy in not just their ability to learn to read, but in their love of reading. And for me, the other thing that's always been really important about graphic novels is because it is visual, I think that it promotes empathy in a way that a prose novel can't, because you see the child crying in the book. You see the look of, disdain that an unkind person gives them. And suddenly you are plunged into that, into that point of view. And I think that's very powerful. And in, this world we live in right now, that's something that we desperately need.
Remy, same question.
Yeah, for me as a creator, I find it well, one of the advantages of using a graphic novel for serious topics is that for me, I can add humor more easily, I think, in a comic than in a prose book, especially if I'm talking about like physical humor. So you can see like someone slipping on a banana peel or something like that. That's just a lot funnier to see. And also I think because with graphic novels, you can move on, like you don't really dwell, I guess, too much on like the very serious moments. I mean, you're compelled to read on to the next picture. I mean, of course, there are ways where you can compose your picture so that the reader have to stay in that moment for longer. But I think in general, it just moves a lot quicker than reading a prose book.
Thank you. Matt, same question.
Yeah, just piggybacking off what you guys are all saying, the experience of reading a graphic novel, in my opinion, actually ends up being almost more intimate than a prose-based book or a film, because you can really you're like a time master. You know what I mean? When you're reading these things, like you can speed up, you can slow down based on like your experience and like what you're feeling. Like what Remy was saying, if you're having a gas and you're really enjoying and you just want to like see what happens next, you can do that. But like Cami was saying, like if you're empathizing with a character, you can really like luxuriate in that moment and really like, I mean, almost like, I don't want to say like paw the imagery, but like it's there for you and you can stay on that page and that sad crying face for as long as you feel compelled to, which is, I mean, it's sort of how we experience things like Netflix. I'm sure you guys have all done this, where it's like, wait, go back. What did that character just say? And you're like, rip, 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 like rewind just a tiny bit. The graphic novel is sort of baked for that experience, where like these are difficult concepts, and if you have a serious subject matter, I mean, you can take all the time you need to process that. Whereas like in a film, like it's on to the next beat, and there's nothing you can do. So.
Thank you all for that. I wish we could stay with this topic the whole time. We're hearing even in the chat, people really appreciate you talking about how valuable these materials are and what they bring to our readers, what they bring to our libraries, to our schools. the amount of thinking that I see kids do when they're reading a graphic novel, I think is really amazing. And like you said, Cami, the gutters, the inferencing, what they're having to do to pull these medias together is just it's a wholly different kind of reading, which is what we want. We want them to be reading and want them to be getting into text and thinking. So thank you for that conversation. That was a great way to start. We're going to move into your texts. Now I want to start with you, Jose. I really want to talk about kind of origin type questions and where your kind of stories came from. Halfway to Somewhere is the third installment, if I understand correctly, in a series or kind of a trilogy you're calling the Mexicali trilogy. What was your goal or vision for the trilogy as a whole, and what role did Halfway to Somewhere play in this?
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it is a bit of a cliche, but like, yeah, I love trilogies. I do love, like it's a one, two, three kind of thing. And the goal specifically, I mean, it was kind of like a bit of a moving thing. It was never that set, but like it kind of came about after I finished Suncatcher, because Suncatcher was the first graphic novel that I did set in Mexicali. But Mexicali, it was more of a background character. So I wanted to like write, keep writing about my hometown in a way that I love, and just kind of representing how much I loved it and how much I loved growing up there. So I kind of just try to set like, well, if I were to do a trilogy, what would that look like? And at first I wanted to tackle just like big theme ideas, whereas it's like, well, if Suncatcher is about a teenager, maybe another one could be about a young kid and the other one could be about an adult. But then that kept changing, and the stories that I was kind of pitching were kind of like molding themselves. But eventually, Twin Cities came off of those drafts, and then so did and then when it came into pitching another book, again, I call it an unofficial trilogy because like this was not like a set design. It's just me kind of presenting it that way. But I said, and I talked with both my editor Whitney Leopard and with my literary agent Elizabeth Bennett, and just kind of thinking like what the follow up to Twin Cities would be, and that's how we started like pitching around like different concepts and ideas, and that's how Halfway to Somewhere came about. So by this look, Halfway to Somewhere represents something that, if Sandcatcher is about the music in the city, and Twin Cities is all about a border town, I wanted to tackle the topic of like, well, what happens when you leave your hometown and you have to find a new home somewhere. Also because, and I'll make this really quick, is that like by Twin Cities, I had drawn Mexicali about as much as I could, so I didn't really want to repeat myself. So I kind of needed to find like, well, how to expand on talking about my hometown. So I started like I started just going to a different region of the city, which is its outskirts, but also talking about moving to a new city, and specifically the U.S. So that's kind of how that came about.
Well, I really love, Jose, how you in this book kind of tackle that complexity of what is it when you leave home, what does that look like? What does that mean? How do you hold on to those traditions? And it's really a complex topic. We handle it beautifully in this.
Oh, thank you.
In this book. Next up is Cami. In Mixed Up, a future protagonist who at first feels as if they aren't intelligent, and later recognizes that they have a learning disability. This realization is facilitated by a teacher who's taken a particular interest in the students' academic struggles. Why are these characters and the experiences they've gone through ones that you wanted to bring to a younger audience?
So I was a reading specialist for a really long time, and I taught a lot of kids who are struggling and some of whom had dyslexia. I also have two brothers with dyslexia, and my husband is dyslexic, and my daughter Stella, who was kind of, one of the inspirations for the book. And one of the common things that I always see in dyslexia is, or any, neurodivergence, any learning difference is, because you're different or you're learning differently, you suddenly feel like there's something wrong with you. You're not smart. You can't keep up. Other people are more intelligent than you. And you can have a child who feels, confident when they're younger. And then suddenly, as the reading kind of ramps up, a dyslexic child oftentimes suddenly goes from feeling really competent and smart and loving school to feeling like they're not smart and they're not as good as everyone else. And it kind of, colors their whole self-concept and all their experiences at school. And so I kind of used my experiences as a teacher, and you'll notice the teacher looks a lot like me in the book. There's also a very important librarian in the book. And I kind of took those experiences with students that I had worked with and my daughter's experience and, kind of mashed them up and, like massage them around into, there's a lot of Stella in the story, but I also didn't want to, tell her complete story because like, she might be a writer one day or something and tell her own story. So, I did put these things together and I looked for common themes and also just, different experiences from different students that I taught and my experiences as a teacher. There's also a reading specialist in the book. But I also wanted to tackle something that I think isn't as often discussed, which is the social implications of something like dyslexia and neurodivergence, which is, Stella's, this show she loves becomes a video game and there's a guide book that goes with it that's really key in playing the game. And she goes from being like so enmeshed with her besties to suddenly feeling on the outside because she doesn't want to tell them she's having trouble in school, but she's having trouble reading the guidebook or her textbooks. So she kind of pulls away and they don't know what's wrong. There are some kind of, she picks some fights and it all kind of, snowballs. And it's really interesting. Brittany Williams, who did the art, did a remarkable job of not just showing the emotions, but kind of, even like with things like the schoolyard, showing how she goes from kind of being in the middle of everything to being on the edges. And then she ends up retreating to the library, which I found that at schools that have a strong, librarian, that tends to happen. They retreat from the playground, and if they can't, stay in their classroom, or if they're lucky enough to have a great librarian, the library becomes a safe haven. And I really wanted to show that also because, there are a lot of kids for many reasons, bullying, that retreat to the library, and it is a safe space for a lot of people. It was definitely a safe space for me when I was young.
Well, we have a lot of librarians on this call today, and I know that this is what we want to create, right? We want to create that space that is safe for all kids. Thank you for that. Remy, in your notes for your book, Chickenpox, you mentioned that the book resembles some of your lived experiences, although you wouldn't consider it a memoir. Why was the Chickenpox episode one that you wanted to share with readers?
Well, it was for a very practical reason. I wanted to show sibling relationships, and I thought, what better way to get them to try and kill each other by sticking them like in the house for 24/7 for at least a week. I mean, a few days would do it, but it would be like a week or at least a week. So most of the events that are in Chickenpox are true. But in real life, they didn't necessarily occur from that time when we had chickenpox because I was too young to remember. I don't remember much of it. I only remembered my mom. She had to take care of 5 of us, and so she had to wake up a lot in the middle of the night just to check on us and things like that. So that was the biggest thing I remember. I mean, the fighting, I felt like that was a daily occurrence. So to me, there wasn't much difference. Yeah. And then there was one of a game in the book that's called the ghost face, I think. And I think we didn't actually play that game, but so we played many games, but there wasn't one that suited the book in a way that could show that character arc and that would look really good visually. So that game I had to make up. And also in the book, the older sister break the younger sister's big toe, and that actually happened to me. My older sister broke my big toe. so that one was true.
Using that chickenpox as a way to show those family dynamics. And you're right, it would probably only taken a couple days, but you show that building pressure over time. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And we're going to turn to Matt. Matt, I have to ask, and I should have checked with you before. Is it Family Force V or Family Force 5?
I've been saying 5.
You've been saying 5. Okay. And if you're going to say 5, I would also like to say 5. I mean, it makes sense. Matt in Family Force 5, readers meet a family of superheroes working together against alien monsters. Of those on the panel, you're the only one really working outside of realistic fiction. So what is your inspiration for this family and their story? Sorry, you probably heard, we're having stuff here at school today. So I probably heard the speakers a little bit. What was your inspiration for this family and their story? Were there any cultural or social elements you were intentional about including?
Yeah, so it's a fantastical story, but I hope that you find the family dynamics to be very relatable. For me personally, I come from, so my mother is Thai. I have kind of a global feeling family, you know what I mean? We've got a lot of relatives in Bangkok. We've got people living on the East Coast of the US. We've got had people living in Singapore at one time. So the family in Family Force 5, they're actually multicultural as well. The mom is Thai, the dad is Japanese, and the dad has inherited this family business, which happens to be, this kind of Power Rangers-y spoof. But really, the heart of the story is the feeling of being part of that big global family and the kind of, tension that exists there. The main character, she feels like she has to perform and exceed expectations in this family unit. And you'll see her in the book sort of dealing with that pressure and being pulled in different directions. And I hope that stuff is very relatable to anyone who has sat in kind of a boardroom meeting, because like my family has like a business in Bangkok, and sometimes they'll have a meeting and I'm just like sitting in there being like, oh God, I want to like do a good job here. And I also don't want to like seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Even though I definitely don't. But actually, weirdly, a lot of inspiration for this book came from this movie called Blow the Man Down, which is like this incredible Amazon film about two girls from like, an East Coast like fishing town. And one of them wants to leave and go to school and like quit the family fish shop. And then by the end of the movie, she decides to stay. And I was so touched with this idea that like, in American culture, we have this very individualistic point of view where the success of the individual is sort of the only thing that matters to us. And I was so touched by the story ending with this notion that actually, there's also nothing wrong with being there for family. So I think when you get to the end of this book and you see how the main character Maisie has kind of made peace with her own dreams and the responsibility she feels like she has towards her family unit, that there is kind of hopefully a mature conclusion there.
Well, I do have to say, I think that really stood out in terms of, watching that character grow into her kind of new role within that family. And I think that's something that kids and I mean adults as well will be able to relate to. So thank you for that. Yeah. We're just going to take just a quick moment for audience. I haven't had any questions yet. You're welcome to ask questions. Just drop them in that Q&A window, and I will be looking so that we can ask some questions at the end here. I also want to take a moment just to talk about Hope Larson's very bad at math, not very bad at math, but very bad at math. Once again, Verity Nelson is running for class president, and it's going to be a slam dunk. Debate club band, widespread admiration. Verity really appears to have it all, except for one thing, and that is a passing math grade. You can see in this panel here, she's being told that it's possible that if she doesn't pass math, that she will not be able to continue her candidacy as for class president. And even when she takes some special tutoring, it's just not clicking. And it's possible that maybe Verity isn't just bad at math, but maybe there's something deeper going on. And in this particular book, with humor and a really great middle grade look and feel, Larson gives us a window into dyscalculia, a learning disability that results in difficulty working with and manipulating numbers. Very story will delight middle grade readers, provide really a window for students and for teachers about this learning disability. And more importantly, I really think this book will help those who, like Verity, are dyscalculic. They'll be able to see themselves in this book. So middle grade novel, or graphic novel, be looking for very bad at math. We're going to shift to talk about craft now, and talk about kind of how each of you, uses that craft intentionally to support your message. So this question first is for Jose. In the midst of a move from Baja California to Kansas with her mother and brother, Avi is not only leaving behind their father and sister in Mexicali, but is concerned that they're leaving behind what makes them Mexican. This is a complex issue that comes through beautifully in this graphic. What were some of the intentional craft or design decisions that were made to help this theme come through so well for readers?
Well, the first thing that I did was I talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people that are of Mexican descent living in the US. I talked to a lot of Mexicans that are now living in the US. I talked to a lot of Mexican Americans. I talked to people that identify as Chicana or Latinx and so on, just because like these conversations were very important, in order to enrich the perspective, because one of the book's themes is just kind of going into the weeds of how even in certain communities, there are, no community is a monolith. So there are like all these distinctions and everyone's experience is very different. So, I have my experience, but in order to like enrich the world of the story, I had to talk to a lot of people. So I had a great time doing that. And the other thing that I did that is more on the formal side of just like how I made the comics is that I did try to stay specifically from Avi's perspective and just have the entire story be told through their perspective, because that is their path, right? That is their journey. So for instance, in this page that you're seeing right now, throughout this entire dialogue exchange, Avi is talking with their sister who still lives in Mexicali. But, the obvious choice would have been that, like, if you're having this talking head scenes, you would also get to see some of the sister on her own and in her room and doing her thing. But like in this story, you always stay in Avi's room. So it's all through just like what they are doing, talking to their sister, because there's this barrier that that there's this degree of separation. So in that way, again, not to spoil it or anything, but like as they start encountering new friendships and start meeting people in Lawrence, Kansas that are also of Mexican descent, they start having like, they start exploring like, oh, like these are like different people altogether. So it's part of that. And the other thing that I tried to do, and like it's a little subtler in this one, but like in this comic, but I do think it's there because I made it, is that the color palettes do kind of carry a big part of the story, whereas in like again, the story begins, but with this family hike that Avi is also constantly recollecting through the story. And whenever we are seeing scenes in Mexicali or on this family trip, it's very colorful, it's very bright colors. The sky is full blue. But once they arrive in Lawrence, I didn't want to be disrespectful to Lawrence because Lawrence is a very beautiful town. So I didn't want to just turn it all black and white or muddy, but I did muted the palettes a lot more. So that way it's more of like, there is color here. It's just going to take time to discover. And that also goes into the theme of, well, Avi spends a lot of time walking around the city and just looking at how things look differently. And that is what is broadening their horizons. So that's how I went about it. So it's like trying to put like both the drawing skills, the storytelling skills, the coloring skills, and the dialogue skills to enrich that message as well. So
put that all together, really intentional. Yeah, I thank you for talking about that. Cami, you discussed this a bit in your notes for Mix Up, but what intentional design decisions did you make to support readers with dyslexia?
So, I made a lot of them. One was the layouts. I tried to keep everything really clean and really linear. It's not, there's a lot of pages that are not, you know, in rectangles, but even so, like you can really tell by the way, you know, Britt size things and by her, you know, her choices really directs the eye, you know, to kind of keep the reader engaged and know where to go next. I also, there's a lot of debate about fonts for dyslexia. There's no studies that prove that dyslexia-friendly fonts make it easier to read, but for many readers, it can make it more comfortable to read. So not only do we use dyslexia, which is a dyslexia-friendly font, our letterer is really, really experienced, and he has a lot of background, and he spent a lot of time really working on the balloons. Dyslexia has to be spaced very specifically, but he also spent a lot of time, you know, with where are the balloons, you know, what are the directions, you know, where can I put things again to really like lead the eye and help the reader. And I also tried to vary the number of panels on a page so that the readers, you know, wouldn't become exhausted. Like we don't have, you know, 5 panels, 6 panels, 5 panels, 6 panels, you know, for 20 pages. We tried to have some 2 panels, some 3s, you know, a lot of splash pages so that the reader could really like deal with the pace and the, you know, the actual, you know, action of reading in a way that wasn't going to be, you know, really taxing. I wanted it to be a fun experience to read the book, you know, whether you're dyslexic or not. And, you know, obviously there's also other types of neurodivergence that, you know, affect your reading ability. So I just wanted it to, you know, I feel like kids have so much to read, even when they don't have a learning difference that is taxing at that age, because they're really just learning how to read well and how to read fluently. So I just wanted to make it as kind of, you know, easy and fun as possible. And also, I don't know if this could be the first graphic novel for someone. And if it is, they're also possibly tackling a new medium, which is, you know, a whole different animal. So in all my books that are graphic, I try to make them as, you know, kind of user friendly as possible so that anybody of any age can dive in and, you know, have a great reading experience.
Well, I have to tell you, I really think it comes through. I mean, and I think it's very, very friendly. And you've used, you know, with great intentionality, you've used those different pieces to make that a really positive reading experience. So thank you so much for talking about that and for doing that as well. Now shifting over to Remy, as we mentioned before, elements of chickenpox are taken from your own experience. You even play a role in this story, although not the starring role, which I love that as a choice, not the starring role, but you do play a role. Were there any unexpected challenges or advantages from sharing this personal story from someone else's perspective other than your own?
Yeah, so I just want to give a shout out here to my colorist, Nina Gilliard. She did such an amazing job with the coloring. Yeah. So one of the challenges for me is that it was hard at first to separate the real person that I'm basing the character on, and the character, because I keep thinking, oh, would my sister do this? Ah, she really wouldn't, and you know, and things like that. Because you know, in real life, people are really complex, and you don't always know what they're thinking, and their character journey, their character arc is not always that linear. It's kind of hard to chart. And sometimes you don't really see that, you know, the reasons you think that the reasons that they do things is not consistent with their character, but actually it kind of is, but you just can't see it because you don't know their whole experience. But in a story, everything has to make sense because that's one of the reasons we read books. So I had a hard time thinking, oh no, my sister wouldn't do this. But once I started like, you know, switching my thinking to thinking that these are just storybook characters, they're not my family. And so that once I got through that, that was a lot easier. And also in the book, Remy is really bad. And so that was kind of hard to write. So I had to think, this is not me, this is not me. So something like that.
Was it fun to write you that way or no? Was that
It was fun, and also, I mean, I always knew that because I am the middle of 5 kids, so So I was at the right age to fight with all of them, with all my siblings. So when I was young, I didn't realize that, that I was such a problem. But then now when I'm older, I'm thinking, yeah, I pity my siblings.
Thank you so much for that, Remy. And now on to Matt. We mentioned your bio. You have quite a bit of experience in animation. What's been unique about building this graphic novel series? And I understand this is the first of a series, correct?
Yeah, knock on wood, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you know, dude, it was so different. It was so different from writing for the screen. And I have such mad respect for all of you and the beautiful work that you put into these books. By the way, I got to read all of these because we got advanced copies and they're all just fantastic. So I almost felt like I was like living in your lives. They were so good, you know what I mean? Like I felt like I was a kid with dyslexia growing up, or I felt like I was stuck in the house with chickenpox, or I felt like I was starting a new home. And I just feel like all that stuff was just connecting just amazingly. So props. So yeah, the experience of writing this. So like I was the writer on this project. Huge shout out to my partner Ainsworth Lynn, who did the drawing, and he's just a genius, you know what I mean? Compositionally, action stuff, just incredible artist. For my part, you know, we did a whole script for the comic book, and I've written a lot of like screenplay work, and it was a completely different world learning how to do a comic book script, because I don't know if everyone is aware, but like, you know, for a comic book script, it really is panel 1, this happens and this is said, panel 2, this happens and this is said. And sometimes the writer will drop in like reference or more description to kind of help the artist, but it really is a synergy in this case between the artist and the writer having to develop, you know, a language, because like we're all maybe seeing something a little different in our heads at first, and we're meeting somewhere, a nice place in the middle. I had a great experience with this. I will say that, you know, something I had to learn was how much was too much for the page. Like Cami, you mentioned that like, hey, you know, I really intentionally stepped out the information so that readers wouldn't feel overwhelmed. And I think in my first draft or two of this, it was way too much. You know what I mean? For like, you know, I'm trying to cram way too much in just a couple of pages, when the real advantage of the medium is space. You know what I mean? And giving that breathing room. So one part I'm really proud of that the artist and I managed to crack was there's a part in the book where something pretty bad happens, and I don't want to spoil it, but the drawing style changes for a few pages to become very scratchy and very not well formed, because the main character is under a lot of, you know, duress. And like that's the kind of thing that I feel like this medium can do that other mediums really can't. And I feel like, you know, you see that all the time where the drawing style is actually a storytelling tool. So, but it was a learning curve for me, full disclosure.
Well, it turned out great. We can't wait to see, knock on wood, the rest of it. Really excited for it. And I have to say, you know, I just echo Matt's words about all of your work. Really, you each bring such unique stories, unique styles, and are just bringing so much to the craft. So thank you for bringing that to our kids, to our readers. I can't believe we're kind of getting to like the last few minutes here. It's gone so super fast. I do have one question from the audience, but I'm going to ask one question first for all of you first, and then we'll do our question from the audience. As you think of your book's primary message, what's the one thing you hope that readers will take away from reading your book? Jose, let's start with you.
Wherever you go, try the food. No, I'm kidding. But I do recommend that. No, but I mean, like, so there's, because it's a book with like a lot of things going on, but like it's to wrap it in a package, I would say that explore and stay open. You know, it's life is short. Be prepared for changes. Nothing is permanent. But and yeah, I mean, like, I think I'll just, someone else said it, not me, but like it's a home is the one you make. So, be ready. Just be prepared for that, and it's going to be okay. But yeah, I mean, the one that I lean on the most is just like try to stay open and perceptive as you explore, because the world around you, you never know where things come from. So
Beautiful. Cami, same question.
So I think the biggest message for in my book is, also for readers who don't have dyslexia, is that we all learn differently. We all have strengths. We all have things that, are more difficult and challenging for us, and that's okay. But I also think the message is like that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to accept help. It doesn't mean that you're less than. And, sometimes, that help can change everything for you. I think that's really important. I think, it's scary when you're, in that middle grade age, when you're elementary and middle school, it's really scary to tell someone that you think something's wrong. So I think my message is really like, that it's okay. And it, again, like everything will work out.
Remy, same question.
Yeah, for me, I think it's that siblings are always going to be annoying. So not really. Okay, yeah, that's true. But I think the takeaway from the book is that people change and grow. So however you experience them at a certain time, they might not be the same person at a different time. Because I definitely did not like my sister when when we were young. But then as we grew up, I understood why she did the things she did. And then so now we have a much better relationship.
And Matt, to you.
So in the book, the protagonist, she's struggling with this idea that she can't be herself and also just do whatever the family wants. And I feel strongly that, hopefully, like the main character in the book, you can come away realizing that like those things don't have to eat one another. You can find a balance and, pursue your dreams and have the life that you want while also, being there for your family and understanding, why they're doing the things that they're doing. Like that balance is out there. I think you can find it in inventive ways.
Thank all of you for sharing those messages with your really finely created pieces. We have a question, one question from Scott. I really like this question. It's what graphic novels or comics from your childhood had a significant impact on you and how they influence your decision to create graphic novels for children today?
So there weren't a ton of graphic novels when I was young.
Right.
But there were a lot of comics. And I was a huge Wonder Woman fan. I was Wonder Woman for an inappropriate number of Halloweens. And I think that like one of the things that I always loved about Wonder Woman as a kid, in her purest form was she was different than other people, and she had to like come, to our world and kind of find ways to fit in, but also she was always trying to find ways to help people understand each other. And I think that's something that graphic novels and comics really do beautifully is, they do let you walk in someone else's shoes and feel what it's like to be another person. And I think that's, the greatest power of them.
I got one, which is that those flight anthology books, like, my God, like when I was, a young artist and looking for inspiration, those things were there and they had it in spades. What I love about them is there's a lot of different voices and there's a lot of different visual styles and there's a lot of like, they're like short films. So like, I remember one that like, Kazu Kibuishi is he's, the one who's tying them all together. And there was one of his short stories in one of them. Gosh, it was about like two kids who were clearly in love with one another and they don't end up together. And I remember even very young, just being like, really, really touched by it. It was like an amazing short film. So I highly recommend those, especially to young readers who it will just give them a lot of like, diversity, visually, content wise. It's good. It's good stuff.
For me, I think one of my favorite books, I discovered it later, not really as a kid, I think, but one of my favorites one is Bone by Jeff Smith. I love that so much. I've read it like a million times. It's the graphic novel that I've read the most number of times. I have the original version, which is the black and white version. I've studied the inking so much. I love it. It's just got humor, adventure, fantasy. It's got everything. So I read it all the time.
Yeah, I want to echo a little bit about what Cami said, which is like one of the thing that I love about this question is that like, what graphic novels, right? But I mean, like even the term graphic novel is not that old to begin with. But also just graphic novels as a thing didn't really come around until like maybe like 15 or 20 years ago, if that, depending on how and depending on how formal you want to be about it. Because before that, I mean, yeah, there were comic books and there were like floppies and monthlies and newspaper strips and things like that. But like, in collections and anthologies and things like that. So like I grew up finding comics predominantly in the newspaper. For those of you who don't know, okay. But yeah, I mean, like the ones that I loved the most were like Henry, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, the Non Sequitur, just like all those things were just like I just loved the form right away. And then as I continued seeking out comics, I kept finding just how expansive it can get. So like even though I never really got into superheroes, long story, but I remember just like seeing what superhero comics were doing in the 90s, which was like crazy and just like over the top, and just seeing the medium explored in that way was like super enlightening. And then when I was a teenager, I started finding darker and grittier and like and more things like that. And then I got to college and I found Blankets and I started reading Raina's Smile, and then Bone and like all these other comics that are just like, oh, there's more to it than this. Like it's not just comic strips in the newspaper. It's not just gags. It's not just silly things. There's entire worlds to be discovered. So like, yeah, I mean, as a kid, I mean, the honest answer is the comic strips that I mentioned earlier and more. But like as I continue learning how to make comics, trying to, yeah, like every time that I find a new one that blows my mind, I'm just like suddenly that becomes my favorite comic. Like yeah, I guess that's why I'm still a child and then sometimes, but
Well, Scott really wasn't asking me, but I will say that I did not, like you, didn't really discover them until, they weren't really available until I was an adult, and it wasn't until I was a teacher that I really started finding them. And I remember the moment of reading Hope Larson's adaptation of Wrinkle in Time and being like, holy moly, like this is something new. This is something that is taking a classic and yet giving whole new life and to it. And this is really a format that is going to be really to our benefit. So, and our readers' benefit. Well, with that, I mean, this has been really an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all of your work. It was really a pleasure getting to see it. We can't wait to see it now in our libraries and with our kiddos. Next, we have a short break. And so if you haven't done so already, make sure to visit the exhibit hall for free resources and downloads. Again, big thank you, Matt Braley, Cami Garcia, Remy Lai, Jose Pimiento. Thank you so much. Great to meet you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
See you later, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's lovely seeing you.